Tonight we concluded chapter 34. Amazing chapter, so practical, so real, so uplifting. And we got into a very practical, real discussion on pain and joy and how we live and what we're supposed to do with it. Hope you enjoy, hope you find it beneficial. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe. What I should have said correctly is that we are finishing chapter 34 and actually beginning Emir Hashem, chapter 35. So I should have mentioned that we're starting a new chapter, which is always, of course, an exciting point to come on. If you happen to miss some classes, well, no fear, we're starting a new chapter. We are right now toward the very end of chapter 34. So what's happening here in chapter 34 that we're at the very end of? So in chapter 34, we said that we wanted to be God's home. We wanted to be God's home. And in chapter 33, we learned we could be God's home, and that was amazing, and that was unbelievable, but it was sort of maybe challenging to internalize our belief in the unity of God. Might have seemed like a high bar, but we really want to be God's home. So the Alter Rebbe here in chapter 34 is giving us two very concrete, user-friendly, doable ways that every single one of us can do it. Every single one of us can be God's home. And the first way that we discussed was learning law. And we explained, it's actually interesting for someone who's following the daily portion of the Tanya, we're actually discussing on sort of a mystical level the uniqueness, the specialness of Jewish law. So there's something very special about Jewish law. It expresses God's will like nothing else. It comes from the highest point, descends to the lowest, because it's so high, it's God's will, which we explained is higher than intellect, and it goes all the way down to our very concrete physical reality. It's so graspable, it's so understandable. It's dealing with the details of our life. So that uniquely makes us God's home. And we're like, wow, where's the book? How do I find it online? This is amazing. This is so doable, and I become God's home? Yeah, whoa. But wait, how many hours or minutes can I study God's law? What about the rest of the day? That's a good point. And he gave us two options, two ways that we could become God's home the rest of the day. One is, on a certain level, thinking, I wish I was studying law now. I wish I didn't have to work for a living. If I didn't have to work for a living, God, I'd be studying your law right now. And the thought itself creates a certain reality, which means on a certain level, you're God's home. The second way, the second approach to this is there's something else you can do. Something else you can do to be God's home, and that sort of takes up a lot of your day anyway, and that's giving charity. Well, why is giving charity God's home? I mean, I know law is God's home because that's what's written in the Talmud, basically. That God found his home is in Jewish law. So if I'm studying law, I become his home. Makes sense. But charity, I didn't know I could do that. Wow, that's so cool. Why? Well, because charity is really God. It's his right arm. It's emulating him. It's his traits. Okay, so I'm like him, so he is comfortable inside of me. Exactly. So why does it take all day? How long does it take to put a coin in a charity box or to write a check? I don't know. It takes all day because you have to work all day to earn the money, which you're then giving a percentage away. Aha. So it takes me all day to earn the money. I get that. But why am I then at home all day for God? Because you're earning the money is enabling you to have the money, is enabling you to give to charity. So if the charity is God's home, the steps that lead to it, you're also God's home. Amazing. But I'm not giving everything I earn. There's a mortgage, there's car, there's gas, there's more gas money nowadays. Like, I mean, not everything goes to God here. So why would all the hours of my work, I be God's home? Maybe I'm giving 10%, maybe I'm giving him 15%, maybe I'm giving 20%, maybe I'm giving 22%. So it should be 22% of the time if I'm giving him 22% of the money. Because to create that percentage that's going to charity, you need to earn the total amount. And to earn the total amount, you need the totality of your work.
Я надеюсь, что ты это то, что ты взял, ты съешь.
So your total work creates a total sum of money, of which a percentage, whatever you determined, your 10%, your 15%, your 20%, is going to charity. But that whole time of work, you're God's home. And there it says, as we know, our sages say, that charity is like the sacrifices. And in the sacrifices in the temple, when they offered a sacrifice, it wasn't just that handful of flour or oil or spice or wine or that animal that went to God. It was the whole kingdom that was a representative of. So the whole animal kingdom was affected by that animal. The whole vegetation kingdom was affected by that flower. So too, the Rebbe says, the totality of the money is affected by your percentage. That was as far as we got. And we were really almost, I think I remember at the end of the last class, I was thinking, should I just like finish off? But of course, I'm sure we were over time, so I didn't. So one final thought about something very cool with your money, and then we're gonna have a concluding thought on this whole chapter. So we are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 lines from the bottom of the chapter. Now, besides this, something else cool going on with your money. When you are proactively engaged in godliness, the most godly space we're in is like right now when we're studying God's will and wisdom, when we're learning Torah, or prayer, or Psalms for that matter. So prayer, Psalms, Torah study, that's our godly space. So when we're doing that, it goes up to God. Everything he ate, he drank, everything he used to benefit himself from those 4/5, like the 80% you kept for yourself, because the Rebbe is assuming you gave 20% to God in charity. For the health of his body, as will be explained. What is the Rebbe saying here? The Rebbe is saying that actually there's two things. It's not a conflict. They're simultaneously happening, and they're both impacting the 80%. Again, we mean the 80% because the Rebbe is saying, oh, you're going to give 20%. So here's what's happening to the other 80%. If you give 10%, this would be the 90%. If you give 15%, it would be the 85%. Not taxing any mathematical abilities here, but that's how it works. Now, what's going on? Well, we said all the time you're working, you're God's home. Because the work is creating the money from which is a percentage that's given to charity, and charity is God's home, and all this is necessary for charity, so it's God's home. I'm God's home for so many hours of my day. At the same time, this is happening, no conflict. This is also happening. The Rebbe says something else is happening with your money, with the 80%, with the part that didn't go to charity. Because the part that went to charity became pure godliness. Imagine taking something like money that has been the catalyst for so much evil in our world, and you're making it pure godliness. You're giving it to charity, it's pure. But the other 80%, the Rebbe says, besides being part of this God's home situation, something else is going on. Because you are a servant of God. And therefore, there are times in your day when your whole being is about serving God. Like when you study right now, when you pray, I'm adding when you say Psalms. At that point, you're in a completely godly state. Now, but you happen to be a human being with a human body. And it happens to be that as a human being with a human body, you need to be sustained so that you can have those moments of prayer and of Torah study. So therefore, the Rebbe said, if part of your day is prayer, if part of your day is Torah study, what happened to your money to enable you to lead a life of health, of necessities, of nurturance, which enables you to study Torah or pray, that also gets shifted to God. So look at the chain. We learn about food chains and ecology chains. So this is the chain here. The beginning starts the money. The end starts you studying that Torah, praying to God, saying those Psalms. You take your money and you go to the store. If you're near Chicago, you go to, I'm not giving commercial, Jules, Mariano, Sarah's 10, Colton, doesn't make a difference. However much money you bring, you probably don't walk out with too much for it. But whatever you walk out with, hopefully this is all healthy, nourishing foods that you're going to go home and eat and feed your family. Live. Whatever else you need for your sustenance. So you buy what you need and you consume it. And as a servant of God, as a God-fearing person, you study, you pray. Verse says, wait a minute. How are you able to be studying and praying? Because you survive. Because you have a roof over your head and it's decently warm and you ate the food and you drank what you needed to drink. You're taking care of the health of your body. How are you able to take care of the health of your body? Because you spent money. So the Rebbe says that money that's going for your sustenance, which is enabling you to serve God, to learn, to pray, that money also has become more godly. Now, we're not comparing it and saying it's on the same level as the money that went to someone else. The money that's going to feed your stomach is not the same as the money that goes to feed someone else's. So the money that goes to someone else is 100% Kedusha, holiness, godliness, very, very, very saintly, spiritual, godly, hallowed money. But the money that's spent on your life, if this is things you need to sustain your health, to sustain your life, and with that, you'll be able to serve God, that money also shifts. Because again, it's part of the chain. The money for the food, for you to eat, drink, nurture yourself, to be able to serve God, to study, to pray. So as you study and pray, the food that you ate and drank gets elevated, because that's what's the energy, the calories you're burning, the energy to study and pray, and the money spent to get that food also does. So both of these are happening concurrently. Because of that 80%, you're home for God all day long. And because you use that money to sustain yourself, and sustaining yourself, then you pray and study, that money that's going in that direction also is shifting to God. Any questions on any of this? Okay, so we can now conclude the chapter. So what we reach to this point of saying, wow, I'm serving God a lot of my day. When I'm learning the law, I'm God's home. When I'm thinking all day, God, if I didn't have to work for a living, I'd be learning law. In a sense, I'm God's home. When I'm working for my living all day, I'm also God's home because I'm giving a percentage to charity. And even that 80% that didn't get to charity, it becomes spiritualized because I use a lot of it on food. A lot of our money goes for food. And that food is sustaining us. And when we're sustained, we're serving God. So look, in so many different ways, I'm really so connected to God all day long. That's the Rebbe's point. But we're feeling pretty good. Now we just end with this thought. V'hine, behold, b'chol prate mine smachos hanefesh hanal, with all the different joys that we've been discussing above, because these past two chapters, 33 and 34, are about rejoice, be happy, you're accomplishing the impossible, you're God's home all day, this is amazing, you're feeling good. Rebbe says, but ein mehen menia, this doesn't prevent lios nivza be'enav nimas, to be very lowly in your eyes, belev nishbar, to have a broken heart, beruch nemucha, a low spirit, b'shas hasimcha mamish, at the same time as you're so joyous and upbeat and really excited that you are God's home and this is amazing and cool and impossible and you're doing it, an achievement and the purpose of your existence, and at the same time you could feel very lowly. Now, how? Why are you feeling lowly, and how can you have the exact, totally two completely opposite moments at the exact same moment? I'm sorry, it's not saying it correctly. How could you have these two opposite feelings, such joy, such lowness, at the same second? Like, one of them you think you'd lose, since. Now they're explaining how you can have these two opposing emotions at the same time. Because feeling really low, that's when you think about your body, your animal soul. And when I'm in this state of joy and feel so great and good, that's the godly soul. That's the spark of God inside of me that's vivifying my godly soul, as we've learned above in chapter 31. And this is what we learned in the Zohar. Now, the Rebbe says a quote here that the Rebbe actually uses several times in Tanya. Tears are implanted in my heart on one side, and joy is implanted on my heart on the other side. what's going on in that quote? And I'm saying it comes up several times. It's in the Zohar. It's a quote from Reb Elazar, the son of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. What just happened? Now, of course, we know Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, Meron, like one of the greatest sages the Jews ever had. His son was quite holy as well. They were together in the cave for all those 13 years. He was quite holy as well. At one point, his father was teaching him the Kabbalistic, the spiritual energy of the destruction of the temple. So how did he know? I mean, obviously he's a great, great sage and a spiritual giant, but he didn't know if he wasn't taught. So now his father is teaching him spiritually what was going on by the destruction of the temple. When he finished, Rabbi Elazar said, wow, I have so much joy. I have so much pain. He actually said it in reverse. Why do I have so much pain? Well, because now I understand the destruction like I never did before. Before I was thinking of the destruction, that physical structure that burned to the ground, all the articles in it that were captive, that were defiled, that were trashed, that were burnt, that were smashed. It was a horrific destruction of God's home. But now I really get the destruction, because now I understand Kabbalistically, mystically, spiritually what was really going on. So I have so much more pain than I had before. At the same time, wow, I have so much joy. Why do I have so much joy? Because now I know the secrets. Now I know these divine secrets that I never knew before. And being a very saintly, godly person, again, on level to live for 13 years with his father in that cave, what could give me more joy than understanding more God? So why did it work that Rebbe Elazar had at the same time such intense pain, such intense joy, and neither mitigated the other? Why? Because they're coming from two different sources. The pain from the intensity of the destruction, which only now can I appreciate. The joy from knowing God's secrets that only now am I privy to. So since they were coming from two very different sources, he could have them both, and he did. So the Rebbe is bringing this to say, like, so to speak, for us as well. We have two different sources going on, why we're in joy, why we're in pain. Again, we're talking about pain. This is stuff we learned like in chapter 31, when we're discussing in chapter 31, the lowness of our body, the lowness of our animal soul, how our body is the prison. Why did God take himself and put him in this prison, which happens to be me and has been my body? So that's all coming from the lowness of physical klipas naiga, animal soul body situation. But the joy comes from my soul. Soul's a piece of God. My soul's so close to God. I'm God's home all day long. So the Rebbe is saying, so to speak, you can also have these two conflicting emotions, and they won't conflict because they're coming from two totally different sources. Now, the disclaimer on that is, don't try it. It's challenging, meaning because we're not pure spiritual entities that we can, or surgeons here, surgically selecting our emotions, where we have the joy from here and the pain from here, and they're coming from two different sources. So therefore we're human, which means by us, things are much more of a, they run over into each other very easily. So therefore, for us, generally, stick with the joy. Joy is a healthy space. Joy is a godly space. Joy is where we want to be. As we have joy, we can also hopefully share and give joy to others. Joy is a space that brings me more success as a human and more success as a godly person. So we're not really looking to go into that other space, if needed, very carefully, as we discussed in chapter 31. But don't think, oh yeah, I'm a surgeon with my emotions, so I have joy from here, but I have pain from here, and the pain and the joy. The twain do meet. They really do. In us. Maybe not, obviously not in Rebbe Elazar, not in a pure, perfect, holy Benoni, but for people like us, it's not such a great idea. But that was the final thought in the chapter. And this chapter actually concludes really a whole approach we've been learning for many chapters. Meaning, if we're going to roadmap Tanya here, Chapter 1 through 17 is the long road of studying, learning, contemplating, meditating, and creating an emotional relationship with God. Chapter 18 to 25 was doing the same desired result, in a sense, of having this emotional relationship, but in a sense more difficult, in a sense faster road of uncovering the natural emotions I already have for God. More challenging in that we're thinking of deeper thoughts, simpler because I'm not creating, I'm uncovering what God already created. By the time I finished chapter 25, I hopefully at least understand the mechanics of creating an emotional relationship with God. That is really the most foundational part. The premise of Tanya is for you to serve God. We are humans. Humans are very driven by our emotions. We might pretend we're driven by our intellect, but we're really very driven by our emotions. So as such, if you emotionally feel for God, you're going to be serving him. And if you understand, but it doesn't reach your heart, I don't know. So the goal, one of the most foundational goals of the Alter Rebbe and Tanya, is for you to have this emotional relationship with God. And from there, everything else will follow. So great, we finished Tanya in chapter 25. Why we have still chapter 53? Well, once we have that premise, now we can start building on it. So chapter 26 through chapter 34, what we just concluded, is really, if I want to be very overarching, discussing the emotions to uproot and the emotions to implant to have the best life, physically and spiritually. We said we have two very great sicknesses that we want to get rid of, which will be this dull heart, right? Spoke about this timtum halev, this very numb heart, and depression, deep sadness. And we want to implant joy. So this has been the road we've been discussing. We had 3 chapters on removing the dulled heart. We had chapters on removing the sadness. I'm sorry, it was actually reversed. First, we discussed the sadness, then the dulled heart. Taking us a long time. And then we started speaking about joy. Since chapter 31, we've been discussing layers and layers and layers of joy. And at this point, there was like, wow, you know how to, you know, all the strategies, 3 strategies to remove that dulled heart. You understand the dangers of sadness and how to get out of it. And you know the road for joy. And we've really accomplished a very foundational goal when we can leave here saying, we know how to get out of that dulled heart. We know how to get out of that sadness, and we know how to create joy. And that was really the goal of this section, which means as we start chapter 35, we are actually beginning a new section. 35, 36, and 37 is a new subsection of Tanya. So before we started, just now that we sort of looked very broadly at what we've been discussing, looking back at this whole unit of getting rid of that dullness in our heart, stopping with that sadness routine, and really going for joy and acting with joy and attaining joy. Anyone have any thoughts on that? Any ways they've been applying it or something they've seen made a difference in their life because of this? It was a very big question to ask. Okay, if anyone has thought, I actually saw that Goldie sent up a chat, which I could not read with my eyes, my old eyes, as I was doing this. Okay, so it's true. Only, as we're saying, only for very, very, very exalted people on a very high level, like Rebbe Lazar, like the Benoni, that they can really do it. And the rest of us are definitely mixed and colored, variegated.
Are you saying that we always have mixed emotions or the opposite?
Not that we always have mixed emotions, but within our emotions, there could be, if at the same time, no, sometimes you could just have pure joy and sometimes you're purely depressed. But sometimes when we have a few things going on inside of us, even in one space, the other one sort of flows in as well, which is what we were saying at the end of this chapter, that even though the Alter Rebbe is saying it's coming from two different sources, so you can stay with both emotions and they will not conflict. But that's really, we really have to be on a certain spiritual level to attain that. And since we might not be on that spiritual level, it might be very challenging for us. The general practical advice is go for joy.
Stick with the joy. Okay.
Exactly. Stick with the joy. That's the bottom line, is stick with the joy. Goldie?
No, I was just responding to when you said about Rabbi Lazar saying that tears are planted in my heart on one side and joy on the other, which was a really interesting. I just thought it was really interesting, and I was thinking about the way. Of course, it seems in conflict with Tanya. It's just the way that we are built to experience both things. Like the world is very, very much a mixed bag. And yeah, sure, go for joy, but like often we are kind of asked to hold both at the same time. I thought, wow, we're built that way. We're built actually.
We are. And sometimes we really do, as you're saying, hold both, because as the Rebbe is saying, if they're coming from very different sources, you're so happy because of this. At the same time, you feel this pain because of this, and and they're not. It's not a conflict. Really, both exist inside of you. We're very multidimensional, absolutely. But if we're looking at ourselves, we don't want to be like overly confident that we can hold both and not taint each other. And that's why we really want to prioritize joy. And this is, of course, as we discussed in chapter 31, that when we are in a situation of pain or sadness, whatever it is, that we want to try to get out of it as fast as possible. Because it's not a great space to be in, and it's easy to become a rabbit hole. It's easy to get stuck. So our goal really is to recognize it and move. And hopefully some of the thoughts you've learned over all these chapters, because we've been discussing this in various different ways since chapter 31, are tools to help you get out of it. Miriam?
Aren't we always kind of in a state of, in a certain way, a state of sadness because Mashiach's not revealed, because we're in Galus? So there's always a little bit of
but it's not a person could be. And again, you're saying Mashiach's not revealed, where in Galus could translate to all the things that we struggle with because Mashiach's not revealed and we're still in exile. So for one person, it's they're stressed with their children, they're stressed with health situations, they're stressed with aging, they're stressed with loneliness, stressed with finances, they're stressed with relationships. All and many
the
more.
Options are endless, right?
Yeah. God's very creative. Many window dressings for that core issue of we're in exile. Redemption is here, but it's not revealed. And therefore there's a long list of different ways it's manifest. So
isn't
there
that
might always be that sense on a certain level, but we really don't want to go there.
Of course we don't. No, it's not that we do or don't want to go there, but I feel like in a certain way there's always that underlying, so much joy, let's say in a moment, let's say just as an example, like a kid gives you nachas, you have so much joy in that moment, but at the same time Mashiach's not here. I mean, in every person it's a different expression of that. So for me it's like, I wish I could share it with my father, but he's not here. I can't even tell him. But so I have that joy, and the joy is there, but then there's also that pain, right? So Mashiach's not here, so I can't share it with him, right? So, but I feel like that's always there in anything. We're celebrating Yom Tif, right? There's so much joy. It's Simchas Torah. They're dancing with the Torah. There's so much joy. But there's always that there's that little stinging inside always, right? So it's not that chas v'shalom I'm in a sad state, no, but there's always that little stinging piece of raw skin that's I wish Mashiach was here. I wish we were all, We could have been all in Yerushalayim, all together with my in-laws, with my parents. You know what I'm saying? Like Klal
I hear what
Yisrael,
you're saying. I'm
we
thinking
could be
sort of like
Oila Regel.
salt. You know, every recipe needs a little salt.
Right. So there's always salt. You know, every Erev Yom Tif, I think about, I wish we could be Oila Regel right now. I wish we could be walking over into the center, into Yerushalayim. Could you imagine if we were all there? Like, there's always that, like, it's there. Are we joyed about everything else? Are we joyed when our you know, our men and our boys are learning Torah? For sure we're joyed. But is it not that? So are we not always in that mixed feeling state, or we're not supposed to be?
I mean, I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on it. Mine is, I think, I'm thinking like, I guess the ultimate role model for us is Lubavitcher Rebbe, and obviously, who could feel more the pain of exile than a Rebbe that experiences all the pain of all the people simultaneously? You know, I'm sure his sensitivity to pain was very, very great. But most of the time, in most situations, that wasn't the space he was in. As he, at least, I don't know if we can say it was in, as we understood it, as we experienced it. It wasn't like temper joy, it was joy. And I think sort of like, I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you at all. And I think in certain times, it's appropriate for that to come out. And of course, as the Rebbe spoke about that cry of Ad Masai, until when, how long, this very, very bitter, painful situation. And I think it's very good to be sensitized to that. But I just know in Hasidic thought, sadness is very dangerous. It's dangerous. It's very easy.
It's interesting what Mrs. Wolf just said.
Yes, yearning versus sadness. Yes. And if you would say, yes, it's a yearning, okay, that's not a sadness, that's a yearning, which is a tzipiyah. You know, we can move from there to an anticipation. It's good times are coming, and it's good to not be content with the current, because that gives us the energy for the change. As versus if you would have the status quo, yeah, life is great, or if it's not great, it's not going to change anyway. It's not getting any better. So might as well come to terms with it. No, it's good not to come to terms. And if we think back historically to a previous lifetime of all of ours, when we were the righteous women of Egypt. So Miriam, the Redeemer, our sage says Miriam was a Redeemer because she was the leader of the women, and through the women, the Jews got out. So Miriam means Mar, right? So you're faithful to your name. Miriam's means Mar. Mar means bitter. She had pain. She had real pain. And that real pain was a catalyst to say we believe it's gonna change. Because if I don't believe it's gonna be different, I wouldn't, as a healthy person, let myself feel that pain. I would sort of get numb. I just wouldn't feel it. I would become blah, gray, numb. I just don't want to feel. It's not healthy to feel, it's not safe to feel, I'm just not gonna feel. But because she believed that no, it's gonna be different, so we're gonna feel the pain and use that as the catalyst to strengthen our trust, to trust and trust and trust, and infuse ourselves with that, and infuse our husbands with that, and go out into the fields, these modest Jewish women, to seduce their husbands and create a new generation of children. And this is all coming from the pain to the joy. It's going to be different. So I appreciate that. Mm-hmm.
I can relate to what she's saying, because you know, there is always, you know, it doesn't matter how happy I can be in certain areas of my life, but there is always in the back of the mind, it is not really complete. I mean, in my case, it has to do with my children, you know, or something else. But there is always in the back of the mind that, yeah, we need Geula in order to really feel completely happy and satisfied, and you know, it's not easy to come to terms with whatever is not.
But I hear what you're saying, I hear what Miriam's saying. I think someone chatted me privately, and I think it's just she's just saying, it helps us to concentrate on the positive. And Goldie wrote something really beautiful here about physics, that our environment is determined by the way we focus on it. I don't know what specifically she was thinking, but I was thinking when she said that about this famous 1-slit, 2-slit light. Is it a ray? Is it a electron? Experiment, where really the cool, weird thing is, it depends if there's an observer or not. Are you looking at it? Is it a wave? Are you looking at it and it's a particle? What do you think? Science is saying things are iffy, and depending if we're looking at it, this is science. Yeah, that's what science are saying. It's a wave. It's a particle. Depends how you look at it. So that's so true for the world of science. It's so true for our world as well, which I think maybe the important thing is, because what Miriam is saying, especially how she's phrasing it, is all of our pains, in essence, are pain because redemption's not here. And we need Mashiach now. And we all know that. And we all have different things, smaller or unfortunately not, that can give us that, we need the redemption now. This is not tolerable. But in general, as our working reality, we're healthier people, we're more successful people, we have a more positive environment in our home, in our life, in our work. It's just like the Rebbe says, happiness creates physical and spiritual success. So it's there, but we don't want to prioritize it. We don't want to worship it. We don't want to focus on it. We acknowledge it. And I'm just thinking of it like the salt that hopefully makes the sweet sweeter. Right. So what Firma is saying is true. And I think that goes back to what Bracha said about if we can think of it as a yearning. But sometimes it's a sadness. Sometimes it's a pain. And we all have it. We all know what she's talking about. But she might have different details, but we all know what she's talking about. And it's true. And then we want to say it's true. And I got to work harder to bring Mashiach. And I want to move on. Because I'm not going to be helped by going there. Because that space isn't a good space for me. Or for anyone. Anyone else?
Yeah, it's Dottie. Hi. So, Mazel Tov.
Thank you.
So I work in a senior home, and I did a Shabbat class with people over 100 years old, and we're talking about what King Solomon said in his old age, that there's a time for every purpose under heaven. There's a time to live. There's a time to die. There's time for peace. There's time for war. And the truth is, we have to go with what life slings at us. And there's a time for crying. I cry every morning for my dear friend who passed away. I cry every morning for her because I before she died, she says it's so hard to say goodbye, and I says, you don't talk that way because doctors aren't God, and I feel this terrible sense of loss. But then this is the thing called life. That we have to be joyful in spite of the sadness, but sadness is a very real part of life. It's a very real, especially when you get older and you have to face these terrible losses. But the thing that keeps you up is belonging to a community who wants you to be up, who will support you in your tough times and be there for you. And that's the joy, is that we're part of this wonderful Chicago community where everyone cares. We give these wonderful classes inspiring women, and that people are worried about each other. I mean, that's genuine joy. That's the core of our existence in Chicago. So the truth is, there's a time for every purpose under heaven, but how lucky we are to be in Chicago. So, until Mashiach comes, we're working on it.
Found a good plot. Found a good place in the interim. So when the Jews went to Poland originally, for the first 100 years, it was a nice place. And then, of course, so they said Poland in Hebrew is Polin, which translates as here we will sleep. And they said, you know what? Here we'll sleep through the Gullus night. It's not a bad place to sleep. So Chicago's not a bad place as we wait with anticipation to be in a much better place. But yes, that it's a lot of beautiful things are being written on the chats. It's really worth reading, and And it's, I think what everyone's saying is true. I don't think anyone has said something not true. And we are human, and some of us have an easier time compartmentalizing and saying this is true and this is deep pain, and I'm living my life and I'm doing what I can to make a difference, or my friend passed away, can I say to Helen for her children? Can I do something? There is this pain where I'm saying there is this loss, there is this lack. So I want to bring Mashiach. What am I doing about it? What can we do? Oh, right now we're learning. Great. We are bringing Mashiach, ladies. We're doing something about it. And I think it's true for all of us, And it's not wrong to know there is that sadness. So I think what Goldie said is really beautiful about, is it something missing in God? But as humans, we can feel a lot of lacks because we don't see how it's all there and all perfect, though we know and we trust and we believe, hopefully. The more you know and trust and believe, the less stress you have, so it's worthwhile to do all those things. But we can feel that we're missing things, even though, of course, God wouldn't let His only child be missing anything. We can feel it, and it's good as the salt. It's good as the catalyst to move. You know, the Rebbe speaks how God made us like with pears, 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, and in our taste buds as well, we have a pear. We have the sweets and the sours. So everything is paired. And the Rebbe says, why is there this pair, the right eye, the left eye, the right nostril, the left nostril, the right ear, the left earlobe, and these sweet and sour tastes? Because we need both in life. We need right and left. We need to taste sweet. We need to taste sour. And yes, of course, the salt brings out the sugar. You know, as we, and then the Rebbe says, ultimately, not only the salt brings out the sugar, the Rebbe says in those places of the sour, the bitter, is the deepest sweetness. When we can go there in a really godly, healthy way, and really go into that space and really say, no, this is God's concealment. And God's concealment is His greatest energies. And just say, okay, God, this is what you want. This is your will, and I'm embracing it. And in there to find the deepest strength. High level task. But there's a reason we have the sour. There's a reason we have the sweet. We only ask for sweet. We only want sweet. The Rebbe always says, revealed, obvious good. We're not blessing anyone with concealed good. We want revealed, obvious good. We want children and healthy children and relationships and marriage and finances. You don't have to think about it, and success and achievement and growth and positivity on the inside and on the outside. That's what we want. Sometimes God chooses to do a few other things. The Rebbe says you can find within there an even greater sweetness, but we want the other stuff. And that's what we should all receive. All receive. I don't know if I have any power, but my husband was the Sandik today. So the wife of the Sandik should have some ability to bless, right?
Amen.
Come on, I think it goes. It makes sense. So just say Amen, and it should be for all of us, all those blessings, because we don't need other reasons to philosophize on sadness. We want straight, revealed good. And for ourselves, in terms of our own work, I think the approach of Hasidus, the approach of Tanya, and the approach of Hasidic thought is go for joy, work on joy, prioritize joy. You don't have to live in this detached, not going to be real with yourself la la land. We know what's going on in our life. And with that and through that, I didn't say despite that, with it and through it, go for joy. Anyone else? I mean, I start new chapter is 921. Any other thoughts on this? I can start introducing the next chapter.
It's really just a very heavy and deep and philosophical, and there's a lot in this, and we all struggle with all these emotions, and we have to acknowledge our pain, and we have to acknowledge when we're sad and not try to subdue it and suppress it. It's going to come out anyway, but you can't get stuck in it. And that's the big problem. The problem is that if we're focused more on what's not going right, and we get deeper and deeper into that, we get stuck. And the goal is to let yourself feel, but not to be stuck. You got to move. You have to be sadness will keep you down and you won't move. And you see it all over the world, that it's so prevalent. There's so much depression because people get stuck. And so the Rebbe is trying to help you to not get stuck, because it's just what happens.
And the Rebbe wrote this in the 1700s. For all of those that think this is a modern ailment, this was in the 1700s, and it was for the Jews then. We might say even more now, but it was for the Jews then as well. Maybe they didn't had too much existential struggles to have the luxury of these, but obviously they had this as well, because the Rebbe was writing for them as well as for us. I want to point out, someone sent me a private message. I mean, there's a lot of beautiful things to read and reread, a lot of really deep points, but someone said something private that I think is such a practical tip. I want to share it. Gratitude. Gratitude is a wonderful way to climb that ladder of joy. And I honestly use it myself all the time. But it's just when you're how I use it. I'm piggybacking what someone else wrote to me, but for myself, if I'm like feeling stressed or tense or under any of that, list of that other stuff that we know about, I really stop, if I can stop, or if I can't stop even as I'm doing something else, but I try to really stop and just focus on the blessings in my life. And I try to just stay focused on the blessings of my life until that negativity dissipates, because it really works. Because if you really feel so grateful, if you really feel how you are so extraordinarily blessed by God, how you're so rich with so much that's real and meaningful for you in your life, then the other stuff, okay, so there's stuff. There's always some price tags around. But I really agree, and I think it's very practical and it really works. I always push a gratitude journal, a thank you God journal. I have journals and journals and journals and journals and journals and journals I've kept for so many years. I should say, as Aliyah from the Shema of Fagi Bassman, who was in our class then, and one year, I don't know, it was her birthday, she gave us all out notebooks. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? I'm like, I'm going to start writing thank you God every night. I've been doing it since for about 25 some years. So it's really very practical, very helpful. It's nice to write it because writing makes something real. It makes it part of the concrete reality. And also, if your handwriting is better than mine, easier, you can reread it. And if you're feeling a little like unloved by God, unloved by what's going on in your life, you reread and reread and reread. And then you're like, oh, I really do have a very good life. Or you just think and think and think. So that
Cyril?
Yes.
Hi. So I just, on what you're saying, I love what you're saying about gratitude. I was at a levaya of a very dear friend here in Chicago. She was 48 and 48. She was 48 and passed away. And her husband was so smiley. He was so amazing at the levaya speaking and having two emotions at once. It was really interesting how he was saying, when he's sitting with her at the end, she went through many years of difficult illness, and she had a lot of pain at the end. And he said, I was sitting with her, and as she was describing her pain to me, I was thinking, I know she's in pain, but at the same time, those of us who are so blessed to have all of our orifices that are working, everything's working, even though we can feel the pain, we have to be so grateful for what God is giving us. He asked everyone to concentrate on Asher Yatzar at the levaya. It was so intense and it was so beautiful that, in memory of a woman who simply struggled with it so much at the end, just to have those, sometimes we forget that just to have everything working, saying Maidani in the morning, saying Asher Yatzar, it's very, very powerful, even without writing things down. It's a very, very powerful awakening of gratitude.
Wow. That's very intense. It's a very special person to be able to do that very high level.
It was, but it was really, I think everyone was really affected by it.
But that's again, it's practical. Just like I'm saying, writing down a journal is practical. I mean, we use the restroom several times a day. So we have, if you're going to use that as your thank you Hashem space, and as you say those words, stop, there's a special blessing we make after we use the facilities to really thank God that we can. And to use it as sort of a generalized space of thanking God for all the things that are working in our lives, thanking God for how extraordinarily blessed our lives are, how extraordinarily good our lives are on even the most physical, basic level. What we have, Goldie's writing about the challenges in the 1700s, and of course we know whole Hasidic movement started after Chmielnicki and Gzeres Tachvatat and these horrific pogroms. But what our lives look like, I mean, just to put things in perspective, we know the Rebbe Maharash, yesterday was the birthday of his son, so must be some of his energy around. So the Rebbe Maharash was the Rebbe of wealth. What did it mean, wealth? What did he have already? His walls were painted. That was like, whoa. His walls were painted. They weren't just plain, bare wood. It was painted walls. And that was like, wow. Look,
big windows. He had big windows.
He had windows. Okay, windows. I remember Goldie taught this. She remembers the history. He had windows. Like, wow. What do we have? I sometimes look around my house and I'm like, what we have, what God is showering on us, or even just like the basics, like you need kosher food. Which store do you want to go to? And the list goes on and 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 on. And it's not that the other stuff isn't true. It's not that the other stuff isn't true, but really we can all look and we can all really, really, like you're saying with the blessing of Asher Yatzar, we can walk without pain, we can breathe without pain, so many things on every level, each person depending on what they're thinking of. There's so much we can be thankful for. And why are we talking about this? Because it's a great ladder to move from pain to joy, from sadness. When you're feeling so blessed and so nurtured and so taken care of by God, it's not that the other stuff isn't there, but you can really, really move with that. Yes, there's so much, there's so many levels. And someone said here, and it's true, that this is a popular thing now to thank God. That's a very interesting thought, because this is a very Mashiach space. It's a very Mashiach space to be aware and see under the physical, it's all spiritual. What's Mashiach? That you look at the world and you see God. The unseeable God is what we're going to see. And when you look at your life and in all the details, you see God and you see his loving hand, his benevolent hand, his you're my only child hand. It's a very Mashiach space to be in. So it's a perfect intro, right? This was planned. Does someone have something they would like to say to thank God for something going on in their life now or in this past week?
I felt very grateful to be able to travel. I can't always take time off work to travel. I was able to travel to a chasana of a very dear friend, or rather the child of a very dear friend, and to participate in the simcha, something that during COVID I couldn't do, and often I can't do because of work. But I felt so thrilled and delighted to be there. And I just, I remember driving home afterwards and just thinking, Abishta, thank you. That was really wonderful. So,
yes.
Small thing.
Stop, breathe, and appreciate. I felt that today. Not only thank you, God, that my son and daughter had a healthy, full-term baby, and thank God that we were able to be by the breast, but the high majority of my children were here. Besides the ones in Israel, they were all here. And I was like, look at this. Not his first child. It's not his first breast. Wow. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. I was just so appreciative to God that they all felt and pushed and came. Someone else?
I was very thankful this week. Somebody bumped into our car and knocked the mirror off, and it really could have been much more. Could have been that it was my husband was driving the car. He had pulled over to the side. It could have been that he was getting out, and there are just so many other. And the person was very, gracious about, paying for it. And we went to the mechanic, and it wasn't even very expensive to fix, which was really surprising. And it got fixed, and so I was very grateful that there was no bodily harm, and that it was relatively easily fixed.
Sure. Anyone else?
A couple of weeks ago, my auntie came home from finally, Toby's baby, from the hospital, and she's doing well. So I'm very, very grateful for that, Baruch Hashem. And also, I stopped in a dollar store for something. This was like 2 weeks ago, and somebody was by the Jewish cards. And I haven't gotten to do Mivtzayim. I always get the people wrong, So I asked this lady who was looking at, she says, "Why are you asking?" I said, "I have something really nice. Do you light candles?" And you could tell that she maybe did, but wasn't. And she says, she was shaking her head sometimes. And I said, "Here, I want you to have this. There's a schedule inside what time to light and the blessings and everything." And it's, no, I don't really need it. And I was able to talk her into it. And I really felt good, because it's another level that I really feel just a direct connection with Hashem and with the Rebbe. So it probably does as much or more for me than the person. And hopefully she will have looked at it and she would start to light again.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Also, something that Golda was saying, during COVID, some things we didn't have the opportunities. Nice. We can talk to people. We can communicate person to person. We can impact people. It's the year of Hakel. Make a Hakel, you and that other person connecting spirit to spirit. It's beautiful. Anyone else?
Yeah. So we just found out in the last couple of weeks that my in-laws are able to come to the United States for the first time since COVID. So Mirz Hashem on Hanukkah, my mother-in-law is coming to Chicago for a day. She's going to be in New York. She's going to be in New York, but she's coming for a day to see my kids. And so I'm really grateful, because usually we see them, once every year to a year and a half. But then, since COVID, it's just didn't happen, right? It's been like probably at this point, it's been at least almost 5 years. So
wow.
we're really looking forward.
Wow.
So
5
grateful
years.
for the opportunity. Yeah, it's been 5 years.
Definitely something to be
She
grateful for.
hasn't met my youngest yet, so looking forward.
Wow, 5 years. Anyone else? I have to share this. This is it's not really my thank you, Hashem. It's really my son's. It's a little thing, but I'm sort of modeling. And it could be big things, could be little things. You just see Hashem's like little hugs. So I'm trying to deal with my son Beryl in someone else's house. Is quite difficult. So they said, oh, they have a tablet. Now they know I don't like these. They said, no, Ma, this you'll like. This is a Yiddish tablet for children, Yiddish stories, Yiddish songs, Yiddish coloring. What's the thank you Hashem part? It was purchased in Goodwill of Springfield, Illinois. So in Springfield, Illinois, where officially there's about 1,000 Jews. Of course, there's many more because, the hidden ones, but still in Springfield, Illinois, a new untouched Yiddish religious child's tablet. My son has connections to various people, so he was doing sports with some of them, and one of them at the end of the game said, oh, do you want this? And before my son reacted, the guy left, and then he sent him a message. The guy went to Goodwill a week later. It was still there. Somehow Springfield, Illinois is not a hot item. So it was still there. But I said to my son, I'm like, that was so nice of God for you. Who knows the wanderings of this tablet to arrive in Goodwill of Springfield, Illinois? But you know what? It was God's gift. A little gift. Obviously, we need more. We can celebrate the little obvious hands of God also. It still feels very warm. A hug.
That's awesome.
Appreciate
That's
it.
awesome.
Yes,
That's
ma'am. Yes, I can show it to you. It's right here.
awesome.
Goodwill of Springfield, Illinois, $5 for new. These religious things are more expensive. Amazing. Anyway, so what the Rebbe said today or this week, a long time ago, well, it was this time of year, so it was still 1991. Very long, very, very catalyzing words. Just as this week is the international conference of all of the Rebbe's emissaries from the whole world. So every year, this Shabbos, the Shabbos that blesses the month of Kislev, the Jewish month of Kislev, is this international conference of the emissaries of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the last time the Rebbe addressed that, which was the winter of 1991, very tail end of 91, the Rebbe spoke such strong, fiery words about the mission for his emissaries. But the Rebbe globalized it. The Rebbe said every Jew is his emissary. And of course, the Rebbe didn't say my emissary, the emissary of the previous Rebbe, who the Rebbe is just the mouthpiece for. Every single Jew is an emissary. The Rebbe said that from time to time, new gates open up in heaven. And when those gates open up, everything can go through those gates. The gates are open. The Rebbe says now the gates open in heaven is the gates of accepting Mashiach. As we accept Mashiach, that's the gate that's open up for everything else we can put through that open gate. And the Rebbe says this is the mission. The Rebbe is addressing his army. And really there's a whole world of Jews as an army. The Rebbe says, what's your mission? Your mission is to reach without exception, the Rebbe says, every single Jew. And give every single one this message that Mashiach is coming. And we only need to accept him. We only need to greet him. We only need to welcome him. That's the last thing. The Rebbe says that everything's been done. The whole work of Shlichus is done. You're saying, really? Every home in the world is kosher? Every door has a mezuzah? Every woman knows about the laws of family purity? The Rebbe has a look we don't have. The Rebbe looks and says it's done. It's all done. And being that it's all done, there's one thing left to do. And that is to accept Mashiach. And the Rebbe says when you accept him, this enables him to do his job and redeem the Jewish people. I'm not a great memorizer. Not one of my fortes. But when I remember the first time I learned these words, I guess it was about 30 some years ago, I was so taken by them, I memorized them. I just said I wanted them to be embedded in my brain. This concept that all the work is done. And the only thing left to do, the only thing left in the service of shlichus, in the service of being an emissary of the Rebbe that we all have the ability of being, is to get the world, to get every single person in this world to accept Mashiach, because when you accept him, this enables him to do his mission and to redeem the Jewish people. So, in case you know you're wearing the badge or not, every single one of us, the Rebbe says, you're all my emissaries. And this is the mission. And each one of us in our own way, the Rebbe discusses what's an emissary. According to Jewish law, an emissary has two components. Totally nullified to the principal, to the sender, and at the same time, independent thought, how to make it happen. So we have the nullification. We're not determining what's our job description. The Rebbe told us what our job description is. To literally accept Mashiach and to get the world around you to accept Mashiach. But then with our own independence, we can think, okay, so for me, how does that play out? What can I do? What's my role inside myself, inside my family, inside my friends, my colleagues, my relatives, the world around me, to accept Mashiach, to enable him to do his job and redeem the Jewish people. And the Rebbe says that just as we have to be a loyal emissary and do our job faithfully, we can go to God and say, God, you have to do your job. You also have a shlichus. You also have a mission. And your mission is to bring redemption now. So we're going to do our job faithfully, and we're going to turn to God and demand that he should do his job faithfully and bring redemption now. And definitely what we're doing is part of this process, learning, living, believing, and then being empowered by the Torah to do something else, another piece of good in this world, another piece of light in this world, something else that's accepting Mashiach, welcoming Mashiach, reading Mashiach, and giving Mashiach the ability, by our belief in him, by our acceptance of him, our acknowledgement of him, to do his job and redeem the Jewish people. We are ready. We are definitely long, long ready. Thank you so much for joining. We should have much great news to share. Imagine next week, the class, we're going to be busy dancing on the streets of Jerusalem. Sounds nice place to be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good week.
Thank you.